Before we get started, if you love shivery fairy stories, I really think you'll love my novel, The Ghost of Nothing. It's got that same haunted, magical, eerie vibe of this channel, but turned up to 11. It's available as an audiobook, ebook, paperback, and hardcover. Honestly, it's the best thing I've ever created, so if you like what I do and you haven't read it yet, I really think you're missing out on a special experience. Links are in the description. And now, on to the stories. This happened in the late 90s, back when I was a teenager, probably 16 or 17, living out in rural Tennessee. I'd gotten myself grounded for something stupid, can't even remember what now, and my whole family went out without me. I was pissed off, sulking in my room like any teenager would. It was sometime between 6 and 9 in the evening. I was lying on my bed when I heard the garbage cans rattle outside. Now, that wasn't unusual. Raccoons and opossums are very common, but something about the sound made me grab my pellet rifle and go check it out. I crept out quietly and headed around the side of the house. As I got closer, I heard this weird noise, like a mix between chirping and clicking. I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't like any animal sound I'd ever heard before. I turned the corner and saw 4 little humanoid creatures, no taller than a medium-sized dog. Their skin was a greenish gray, and they were skinny, like skin and bone skinny. They had pointy ears like elves, but their eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just black. And their mouths weren't really mouths, more like thin slits. They didn't seem hostile at first, just curious, like they were poking around the trash, not expecting anyone to show up. I don't know why I did it. Fear, maybe, or just being a dumb teenage boy with a pellet gun? But I shot one of them in the back. It didn't bleed, but it turned around and let out this horrible shriek. Then the other 3 started shrieking too. The next thing I knew, they were hurling trash at me, old food wrappers, whatever they could grab, and I panicked and ran straight back into the house and up to my room. For the rest of the night, they threw rocks at my window, never breaking it, but they did crack the glass. They didn't stop until sometime early the next morning. I never saw them again after that, but I've never forgotten it. At the time, I thought there were some kind of gremlin or goblin. That's what they look like. I posted this story online years later, and some people said they might have been fairies. I think fairies are mythical creatures meant to protect areas of the world like rivers and forests. Whatever they were, I feel bad about shooting that one, and I wish I could go back and apologize. This happened in Pennsylvania when I was around 10. My family lived in a house with a very long driveway that went down a steep hill to a road. One day, my dad drove my sister and I down to the bottom of the driveway to wait for the school bus, but it was running late. I really had to go to the bathroom, so I figured I'd have time to run back to the house rather than wait to get to school. I made my way up, and once I got to the top of the hill, I saw that the garage door was open, which was strange because I was almost certain we had shut it. As I got closer, I noticed something standing in the front middle of the garage. At first I thought it was an animal, but as I got closer, it slowly began to dawn on me that I was looking at some kind of gnome. There's no other way to explain it. It looked exactly like a garden gnome, except taller and real, living and breathing. But otherwise, everything about it looked like a replica of a garden gnome, complete with the tall, pointy hat, the beard, the boots, the belt. The only things that were different were that the hat was blue, and the height, it was about the size of a 3 to 5-year-old child. Not knowing what to do and not wanting to get any closer, I just stared at the gnome. After a few seconds, he smiled at me and waved. I did not believe that the gnome had any particularly terrible intentions, but I felt uncomfortable, like he was not truly friendly, just putting on a show. I took off back down the driveway where my dad and sister were waiting. I told them what happened and they came back up the driveway with me, but by the time we got within view of the garage, the gnome was gone. I have to say that even before this particular experience, there were a few strange incidents in that house that made me suspect the presence of fairies or other supernatural beings. My siblings and I had already started to think of the house as having a bit of a reputation, at least in our eyes, for that kind of thing. As an adult, I've read many books about fairies and other supernatural beings, and I'd say I've learned how to tell the difference between types of fairies. From everything I've read and researched, I know that gnomes are considered a fairy, and the being I saw definitely fit that description. I've also had experiences with other entities, ghosts, aliens, things like that, and each has a distinct feel to it. As I've gotten older, I've come to notice these differences more clearly. It's hard to describe, but each type of encounter has its own vibe, a kind of aura. I believe fairies are real, magical beings who live among us, but they're rarely talked about. Not because they're imaginary, but because they avoid being seen. A lot of people dismiss them as unrealistic, but I think that's just because they haven't experienced them for themselves. This happened back in the summer of 2016, July 21st to be exact, when my husband and I were on holiday in Iceland. We were visiting the Botanic Garden in the town of Akureyri. It was a beautiful day, sometime between 1 and 2 in the afternoon. We were walking through the gardens, just enjoying the flowers, when something caught my eye, hovering right above the blossoms, no more than a foot or two away from us. At first, I thought maybe it was an insect, but as soon as I really looked at it, I knew it wasn't. This thing was very tiny, maybe half an inch long, and light blue in color, with a human-shaped body. It had wings, 2 sets of them, and they were moving so fast we couldn't really make out a face or any real details. The wings were shaped like 2 overlapping V's. One was a normal V on top, and the other was an upside-down V just beneath it, like a double-layered wing. The wings were translucent and sort of glowing white. I've spent a lot of time around insects, and I can tell you that this wasn't one. I just stared and said out loud, "What the heck is that?" And right at that moment, it zipped away up into a nearby tree, fast and light as air. My husband saw it too. And the thing is, he's a total skeptic, doesn't believe in anything paranormal. But even he was speechless. He just stood there with this look on his face like he'd seen a ghost. To this day, he still doesn't have an explanation for what we saw. Before that trip, we'd actually heard that a large number of Icelanders, something like 50%, believe in fairies or the hidden people. We had a laugh about it at the time, like, oh, how charming. But after that encounter in the garden, we stopped laughing. Honestly, it reminded me a bit of Tinkerbell, but simpler, not as cartoon detailed. Just this tiny glowing creature with fluttering wings and this impossible magical presence. I'd really love to know if anyone else has seen something like that in Iceland. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I moved into my house in 2020. At first, we planted this basic little tree out front, but it just refused to grow. It stayed the same size and eventually died. Then my uncle came by with a hawthorn tree, which, if you know anything about fairies, has all kinds of folklore around it. He planted it in the same spot. And for 2 years, absolutely nothing. Not a single sign of growth. I figured, well, maybe it's just another dud. But then I decided to put my spiritual beliefs to the test. I went out there and visualized the white light of selenite wrapping around the tree. I buried a piece of clear quartz and rose quartz in the soil, and I said to the tree out loud that I loved it. And I really meant it. A few days later, I went outside and noticed something. One of the branches had little buds growing on it. First growth in 2 years. I was already amazed, but then as I was standing there looking at the buds, this bright blue flash kind of burst beside me. There was a sound too, almost like a tiny zap, and it felt like it came from the tree. Then I saw this light swirl and dance just beside my head for a good 10 seconds. I kept staring, thinking, wait, is this actually happening? I was blinking, like testing myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming or hallucinating, and then the light flew away toward the side of the house. Right after that, my boyfriend came from around that side of the house. Before he could say anything, I asked, "Did you just see a blue light fly past?" And he said, "Yeah, I saw this blue streak or something shoot past and cross the street. Then it disappeared." So, yeah, that's what happened. That's what I've got. I'm sure it was a fae because I've been asking for them to reveal themselves to me, and apparently they did. To me, that hawthorn tree is my prized gift from the universe, and I think there may be more fae activity around it. Also, my silver Pandora necklace went missing recently, and I've got a feeling that might be the work of a house brownie. Just saying. In the area where I live, there is a small forest off beside a large farmer's field. There's no path, but occasionally I like to walk up there and through the bush, just for fun. The first time I went out there was in late autumn on a cold and wet day. I went pretty far into the bush and eventually came across a birch tree. I found it kind of weird because usually there's more than one birch tree in an area, but there was just this one, way back in the bush. It was thick and tall and covered in moss. I'm a tree hugger, so I kind of just sat down with my arms around the tree for a bit. It was really peaceful. Then I started to sort of feel that the tree was warm. Not super warm, but warm enough to notice. I don't know if trees can get warm or not, but it felt strange when it started to get warm, like a fuzzy kind of warm. The tree roots were kind of half exposed, and they went out really far to the sides instead of going down. I admit I didn't actually see anything fairy-like around or near the tree, but I just felt so peaceful while I was sitting there with it. I just had this feeling that it was a fairy, disguised as a tree, possibly. Either way, it was a really lovely experience and a strange one. I hope it was related to the Fae. This experience happened in 2019 in suburban Redcliffe, Australia. It was a quiet afternoon, and I had my two Cavalier dogs with me at the time. We were about to go for a walk down the street. As I walked past a neighbor's tree, my attention went to a dragonfly that came out of nowhere near a corner, which has shrubs and a tree. Only the dragonfly was flying horizontally and revealed two legs and a male body with his back turned. I was so shocked, I jumped back and called, "Is that what I think it is?" This encounter only lasted a second, but this male fairy had longish black hair a little past his neck. He had an orange golden skin tone and a groin skirt made out of brown twigs or leaves. And when he fluttered, his dragonfly-like wings illuminated a rainbow-like aura. I was in awe. It was like seeing a fairy from one of Shirley Barber's illustrations come to life. A rainbow shone from his long wings, and then he disappeared. A couple started to walk behind me, so I tried to look out for the male fairy one more time before moving along. He was nowhere to be seen. It was a mesmerizing experience. I've had more strange encounters like this. The dragonfly fairy was the second experience of fairies I've seen. From seeing the back of him, he seemed like he was a muscular build and about 10 centimeters. He was very beautiful and dashing, even though I only saw the back of him. I'm not sure if he was holding a spear or arrows. That part of my memory is always hazy. But I wonder if he was on some sort of mission and crossed realms for a moment. That's it. That's all that happened. Thank you for hearing my experience. About 2 summers ago, I was really into Wicca, and I liked the idea of being a witch. It ended up sort of being just a phase, but at some point I learned about protection jar spells. Basically, you fill a little jar or bottle with different ingredients and seal it with wax and draw a symbol on it that's supposed to give it the ability to protect things. At that point in my life, I was afraid that an old willow tree in a park near my house would get cut down or fall. And since I really liked it, I didn't want anything to happen to it. So I made my little protection jar and brought it down to the park. The big willow is a massive tree that spreads outwards and up, sort of like a hand with fingers. And there's a small little spot in the center of the tree where you can stand or sit. It's very beautiful. So I left the protection jar nestled in the little area in the center and went home. When I came back the next day, the jar was gone, and instead there was a giant bouquet of calla lilies. Calla lilies don't grow anywhere near where I live, and these lilies looked fresh and had very long stems that were about my height. They were really pretty, and I never actually seen calla lilies before, so I wanted to take them home. But they were so long, and I didn't have a place to put them, so I ended up just leaving them there in the center of the tree. When I came back the next day, they were gone, and the jar was still gone as well. It was a really odd experience, and I don't really know what to think of it. I didn't actually see any fairies or anything, but it just seems a bit odd that the day after I leave a protection jar in a tree, a big bouquet of flowers that don't grow here appears in its place. Maybe it was a fairy trying to thank me for leaving the protection jar? Or maybe it was something else that didn't have good intentions. Or even just a person could have left them there, I don't know. But the more I think about it, the more I want to believe that it had something to do with fairies. Hello. I grew up in rural New England and was always spending time in the woods surrounding our property. Fairy rings were common occurrences on my parents' lawn. Under the great oak tree my dad planted, a perfect heart of bare earth formed, just the outline. I remember placing small pieces of quartz in the outline. One day I was walking the tree line and noticed a leafy twig springing up and down. It was a sultry summer's day with no breeze whatsoever. I simply acknowledged whatever presence was playing on the twig with a dip of my head and a smile, and continued on my way. During my 20s, I would hang out a lot at my local park. The park is near the one library in my county. I felt the urge to swing on the swings and walk on the single 2.5 mile trail. The park made me feel happy and peaceful despite my hectic life working and going to college. I felt one with nature and even got to see the local wildlife, such as snakes, foxes, or deer. I was into the paranormal at this time. I believed in ghosts and aliens, but the idea of fairies was too far-fetched for me. That day, I remember feeling depressed because of the events happening in my life, probably pretty angry too. So I went to the park and walked the trail. There was a small thunderstorm during the walk, but I didn't care. I was in such a bad mood. The storm passed quickly. I went into the woods, went down the steep hill, and passed a bridge. Beside the trail, there was a small stream. Now, I have passed and even hung out by this stream plenty of times, but this time there was something there that I had never seen before. It was a sort of white but also transparent, foggy orb hovering over the stream. It was about the size of a golf ball. It was moving from side to side as if it was playing. I stood there gaping at this thing for what I thought was 5 minutes, my intuition telling me that I was looking at a fairy. I told myself this must be a trick of the light, but I didn't see how that was possible. I stepped forward to try to get a closer look, but I was hesitant. My gut feeling told me that if I came too close to it, that it would disappear. I've had other weird, maybe paranormal things happen to me, and I'm usually a scaredy cat about them. But in that moment, I felt no fear at all. After watching it for a while, I continued down the trail, deciding to just let it be. Later that day, or possibly a few days after, I began to research fairy encounters. I did find some stories about ghost-type orbs floating above streams. One of the websites even had a picture of a ghost orb floating above a stream that looked a lot like the one I'd seen, except this happened in a completely different location. Another online source said not to approach the orb or fairy because it might either flee or act aggressive. So I think I did the right thing in observing the orb and not trying to get too close or interact with it. Another interesting thing I discovered on one source was that fairies can disguise themselves as dragonflies. The site showed a picture of a green and bluish dragonfly that did look a bit humanoid. I remembered one time, either before or after the ghost orb incident, I was at that same park. It was another nasty, wet day when I saw the biggest dragonfly I'd ever seen hanging on a thin tree branch. I would say that it was the size of a Barbie doll. It was blue. I don't remember if it had some green. I was very close to it and I did study it. It stood there very still, not moving. It didn't even look a little bit humanoid to me, which was good because I think that would have freaked me out. I wasn't afraid of this either. I thought it was just a unique dragonfly at the time, but now in retrospect, I do wonder if there might be a fairy presence in that park. I'm in my early 30s now and don't go to the park as much anymore. I'm too heavy to swing on the swings and now get blisters on my feet when I walk. But looking back on my experiences, they both happened during bad weather. My theory is most people won't go to the park when the weather is bad, so fairies feel more comfortable about showing themselves. It was a cool experience that I thought was worth sharing. I hope that you all enjoyed my story, and thank you for letting me share it. Thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone who submitted their stories for this one. Let me know what you think of these stories in the comments. For those who didn't watch my last video, I just have a few quick announcements. I recently revamped my writing website, so there's more content there for anyone who might be interested in that. It's got some fun and interactive elements now with fairy paths that you can follow. One of the hidden paths on the site leads to the prologue to book 2 of my fairy book series, so if you're interested in reading that, it's there, although it may take a little while for you to find it because it's a bit hidden. I wanted to create the feeling of being lost in a fairy forest, so hopefully you'll have that experience if you visit my site. I also had another idea that I wanted to float with you guys. I mentioned it in my last video as well. I had this idea to get fairy creators together that we could link to each other in kind of like a fairy web ring, just to make it easier to discover other fairy creators. I've just noticed that the YouTube algorithm isn't the greatest at recommending things, so I'm trying to create something where we can recommend each other. I'm calling it the Fairy Ring. And if you know any creators who might want to join, I'm still collecting names and organizing it, but hopefully I'll be able to launch it soon. And it's going to be a type of thing where it's going to be like you can follow a fairy path. You'll jump from link to link and just discover new creators and hopefully new magical worlds. If you're a fairy creator and you would like to join, please mention it down in the comments. Or if you know any fairy creators that you want to recommend, please mention those in the comments as well. Of course, if you haven't already, please do check out my fairy fantasy novel, The Ghosts of Nothing. Links are in the description. I'm working on the sequel now. For a chance to win a free audio copy, subscribe to one of my newsletters, either my fairy newsletter, Fairy Lights, or my writing newsletter, The Shaken Tree. It's free to sign up for either, and just a good way to stay in touch since YouTube isn't always reliable, as I previously mentioned. All those links are below. If you have a story to share, I'd love to hear it. You can submit your fairy experiences through the form on my website, where you'll also find my mailing list signups and all the ways to follow me if you would like to follow me on social media. A huge thank you to all my supporters on Patreon, as well as all of my channel members. Thank you so much, and thank you to all those who made a one-time donation through PayPal or Ko-fi, or subscribe to the paid option on my newsletter. Your support keeps this work going, and I appreciate you all so, so much. If you'd like to support this channel, all the options are in the description below. Hopefully you can find one that suits you best. The stories in this video came from subscribers and the Fairy Census, so a big thank you to everyone who submitted. These stories were edited for dramatic effect, but if you'd like to read the full Census stories, you can follow the link in the description. If you like this video, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It helps the channel so much when you do that. And don't forget to hit the bell to be notified when new videos go up. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.